Hello, my friends, my dear storytellers, my Wednesday crew. I'm so glad to be here today. So glad to see a bunch of you here waiting. Some comments happening already. Always a warm welcome. Hey, Facebook users, don't just be a Facebook user. Let your light shine. If you're watching on Facebook, you can go to streamyard.com/Facebook and just say, hey, it's okay to let people know that I'm there. It'll just make your name pop up in the comments should you leave a comment. And I hope you will leave a comment because we're live here on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. I am coming to you from sunny Southern California where it stopped raining. We had something that was a real pattern interrupt, a couple of heavy rainstorms yesterday. Today we're sort of back to the sunny normal. And I'm here to talk with you, not at you. I do a lot of talking on these live streams because I have lots to offer and I really want to be of benefit to you storytellers out there. We're here every week to talk about story structure, to talk about writing craft, to talk about the mindset of the working, thriving writer. And these are things that are endlessly fascinating to those of us who feel called to write, to tell stories, and whatever it is we're writing, it's not just what we do. There's a strong sense that it's part of who we are, and I think that that is a sense that should be honored. If you're a creative person, it's part of you. It's not optional. So it's always a thrill to see everyone. Let me just say hi. Hey, Hillary is here. Lovely to see you, Hillary. Nancy, a warm hello. Terry, waving back at you. Cynthia's here too. Fantastic. We have a topic today that has to do with a question that my dear mom used to ask me and my two siblings when we were kids, living in our little ranch house, identical to all the other little houses in the development in the suburbs on Long Island. It would be summertime. The weather would be nice. We'd have not that much to do. And we would go in the backyard and we would come back in the kitchen and get a glass of water. And then we go out in the backyard again and run around. We get hot. We'd come in and we sit in front of the TV for 10 minutes to kind of cool down. We'd go out again. We'd come in. We use the bathroom. We'd go out. We'd come in. And my mother would finally say, hey, are you in or are you out? Are you in or are you out? And swung open. Mosquitoes. This is Long Island. We're talking about the South Shore of Long Island. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. Mosquitoes, like the size of a child's head, would just enter the house. And so, the screen door was like a shield against the elements that was very, very important. And every time we swung that door open and shut, my poor mom was just imagining these hordes of bloodthirsty insects coming in to devour us. So she was right to ask, are you in or are you out? What does this have to do with writing? As fiction writers, we have a superpower, don't we? We have a superpower that's kind of unique to our very special art form of writing fiction. And it's this: we can, if we so choose, go in to the head, the heart, and the body of our fictional characters. We don't just have to look at them from the outside as if we were looking at a painting. We can literally go inside. In real life, we cannot do this. Even the people we know best in the world, whose sentences we finish and whose characters we think we've got down to a T, it's really only us making up what we think they're like on the inside. We can never really go inside. In fiction, we can. It is remarkable and profound and kind of metaphysical, and it's something that we can do as novelists. So we can go in and we can come out again. We can go in and we can come out again. We can go in, we can come out, in, out. Are you in or are you out? It's a problem that writers struggle with, because we just don't always know if we're spending too much time inside, too much time on the outside. Are we going back and forth through that screen door of fiction too often? What do we do? There's a balance to be struck to create the best experience for our readers. But what is that balance? It's a trickier question than it at first sounds, but I would be curious to know how many of you who are here have ever felt yourself unsure Am I spending too much time inside? Have I forgotten to go inside for a long time and reveal my character's inner landscape? Have I spent too much time on the outside, right? So if you have questions about this, this is a great cue for you to leave them in the comments to share your questions and experience, because it's a live stream and I want to hear what you have to say. That's what we're going to talk about today. Are you in? Are you out? Before we're done, I want to make you feel a little bit better, by the way, about the fact that it is confusing. Like so many things having to do with writing fiction, it's just more complicated than it looks at first. There's more to it than at first appears. So I want to unravel that a little bit and then, give you some tips for how to find that balance that works best for your reader. Okay. So before we get in, let me introduce myself. Anybody who's here for the first time, watching on the replay, new to the live stream, I'm Mary Rose Wood. I grew up on the South Shore of Long Island, and I can't even tell you how many pints of blood were consumed by the mosquitoes of that noble, moist, hot, humid land of my youth. And I grew up to be a novelist, and I'm best known as the author of middle grade fiction. And I'm also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own program and community for mentoring writers, helping them level up with training and ongoing support as they put what they learn in the Path of the Storyteller program to use in their own magnificent fiction. And I hope if you're not on the mailing list already, I would definitely invite you to take this opportunity to join. Make a note to join the mailing list, because as some of you already know, I've been working very hard for the past few weeks creating a new program. It's a new course offering about a topic that I know from experience puzzles writers to no end. And I'm going to reveal that topic today for the first time. The topic is how to approach writing a scene. And it is a good one. It's a juicy course. It's going to really analyze and deconstruct what goes into a powerful scene. Why did I choose that topic to create a new course on? Well, I'll tell you. What is your book made of? Words? No. It's got words in it, but your book is actually a series of scenes, isn't it? It's choosing the right scenes and writing them well and putting them in the right order that actually allows us to have a completed draft of a book. It sounds sort of simple when I say it that way, but writers don't always think of it like, oh, the building blocks of my book are actually scenes. So I thought about what was most needed out there in writerland, and I'm quite convinced that this is going to be a transformative opportunity to really settle it once and for all. You'll know how to do it. But why did I ask you to join the mailing list? Because if you do, you're going to get first dibs on this brand new offering. And that would be good for you and good for me to get you one of the early takers of this program, because it's an introductory price and with some added bells and whistles that won't be available if you find out about it later on. So that's a powerful incentive, right? Get on the mailing list. That's my message. All right, my friends, are we in or are we out? Let's define terms. It's always good to agree on what we mean by the words we use. So our topic today is striking the balance in our writing between what I call inner life and external events. So let's just calmly make sure we all mean the same thing by these terms. Here's what I mean by inner life. You create fictional people, right? Your characters. And those fictional people, just like real people, have stuff that goes on privately in their heads. There may be evidence of what's going on in their heads on the outside, but the gist of it, this experience of consciousness, if you will, is private. If they chose to conceal it, they could. I'm talking about emotions. If your fictional character has emotions, they may be visible. There may be behavior that is motivated by the emotions, but the emotions themselves can be concealed. It's an internal experience that can maybe, if you so choose, get manifested on the outside. But the character's emotions start out as an internal experience. And if the character has a poker face and really chooses to hide what they're feeling, they can. The other characters in the story won't know what they're feeling. But if you, the writer, choose to make emotions visible to the reader, that's inner life made visible to the reader. All right. Along with emotions, of course, is the related category of consciousness activity that we can just call thinking, thoughts, the character's thoughts. And anybody who's ever tried to sit for a little bit of meditation knows that even when we're trying not to think, we're thinking. Especially sometimes when we're trying not to think, it seems like all we do is think. There's a lot that goes on in the mind of a person. There's conscious, intentional thinking. You know, we could say, I'm really going to sit down and think about this and choose what to think about, and you know, kind of carry on an organized debate within our own minds. But I think most of us let our thinking run on a longer leash than that. Am I right? We're not always planning what we're thinking. It just happens. There's just a chatter in there. And the gift of the novelist, of course, is that we could draw apart the curtain of privacy on what the thinking is that's going on inside our characters' minds. And if we so choose, we can make it known to our readers. Most of us are not able to project our thoughts visibly to others. We may want to. This is a common problem when people attempt to communicate with one another. We may feel that we shouldn't have to express what we're thinking. We feel the other person should just get it. Don't they know? Don't they already know? But alas, no, you all know this to be true. We have to express what we're thinking or other people won't know. It's the same with your fictional creations. If you don't have them express what they're thinking, the other characters in the world of it won't know. But you can choose to express what they're thinking directly to the reader without letting the other characters in the world of the story know. It's very interesting. I'm using the word consciousness right now, and I actually want to make a distinction between what I'm describing as thinking and a kind of a deeper level, if you will, the next deeper level of thinking, which is stream of consciousness. And to me, it's a subtle distinction, and it's maybe an unnecessary one. But remember that when we're thinking about solving a problem, or when we're thinking intentionally, and we're thinking almost, I guess the way to say, in sentences, we're thinking in sentences, we're making coherent, logical thoughts move around our brains. Perhaps we're trying to solve a problem. That's one kind of thinking. But when we're really just let go and we're just letting the chatter, the natural internal chatter of our minds burble along, it's kind of different, right? It's stream of consciousness. And that too is a state that exists within the fictional consciousness of the characters that you create. They think, but they also have a stream of consciousness. So even when they're not trying to think, they're thinking. There's something in there. The consciousness doesn't go blank. So remember that, because what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to really draw a fairly nuanced portrait of what the inner life of a fictional character might include. And so far we've got emotions, we've got thoughts, which are more coherent and intentional, but we also have stream of consciousness, which is that, you know, what the Buddhists call monkey mind, that stream of chatter that is just there, even if we don't intend it to be there. It's just always there. I want to also flag the idea of memories as part of a character's inner life. Now, you could easily say, well, aren't memories thinking? Aren't memories stream of consciousness sometimes? They come to us unbidden and not necessarily in a coherent way. Maybe something in the environment triggers a memory that's more of a sensation or a feeling. Memories can be emotional. So the lines between these things are not drawn with precision and firmness. But I just want to call them out separately because we tend to use them differently as writers as we tell stories. We have characters feeling emotion. We have them thinking often about strategically what to do and reacting to the events of the story. Stream of consciousness is a thing that's always there, that is useful in a sense because it shows what's going on even without our character's intention, but it's our intention, right? Because remember, our fictional friends are fictional. We love them. They may seem real to us, but in fact, we are making them, we're making them up. We're making them up. And so even if their stream of consciousness is not in their control, it's in our control. And what does that make it? An expressive tool. It's an artistic technique. It's something that we can decide to manipulate. And the same with memories. It's very common, isn't it? I'm sure you've all done this in your own storytelling, to have a character suddenly remember something, suddenly relive something from the past, or be reminded of something from the past, some event in the present makes them harken back to the past. Sometimes this can take the shape of what we call a flashback scene. And that's a very interesting crossover between inner life and outer life, because if the character is remembering it, that character is having an inner life experience. But if you decide that, no, I need to put this outside, and I'm going to talk about the external stuff in a minute. If I need to put it outside, you may have the impulse to say, I'm not going to just leave it in the memory of my character. I'm going to manifest it into the external world of the story and create a flashback, actually show the scene from the past happening in the external world. So memory has an interesting quality, doesn't it? And how many stories do we write where there's some key memory from the past that ends up playing quite an important role? Whether it's a burst of mentorship, if our hero remembers some encouragement or guidance they got in the past, whether it's something traumatic, the source of an ongoing fear or vulnerability that gets triggered by these challenging events of the story and serve almost as an obstacle, a force of opposition to our hero, a threshold guardian archetype. Memories have a lot of storytelling juice in them. So I did want to call them out as a separate category of inner life. The other thing, and this is super important, that is part of a character's inner life, and this is a bit counterintuitive, is physical sensation. I am sitting here in my body. Where else would I sit? It's the only place that I have to sit, right? That's true of all of us. And it's true of your fictional characters as well. They have bodies, fictional bodies. I have physical sensations that you don't know anything about. I happened to fracture my toe last week, so my foot's a little sore. It's real. My foot is something you could see, but the sensation of my foot being a little achy is private. Unless I choose to tell you about it, you don't know. But if I were a fictional character and you were my author, and I was going around the world of my book not revealing to anyone that my foot was bugging me a little bit, you could still let the reader know. It's a private inner experience, even though it's physical. And you, the author, make the decision about how much is revealed to the reader. Okay, so you see, when we start to think about inner life, it's not just, inner life. There's a lot going on inside us. There's a lot going on inside our fictional characters. Why? Because we're trying to create them on the basis of what it actually feels like to be human. If we're writing fictional characters who are not human, well, our readers are still human, and we're almost certainly telling a story through some allegorical means about what it means to be human. So it still applies. The things that may be fascinatingly different are the physical sensations, because we can imagine that the physical sensations of, say, those mosquitoes that were coming in and out of the screen door of the kitchen and driving my mom crazy when we were kids, going in and out of the house constantly, have a different sense of their physical being than you and I do, right? They're mosquitoes. I don't know. What does it feel like to be a mosquito? This is part of the fun of writing fiction, is imagining stuff. But for the most part, we're trying to use our own expertise and what it feels like to be alive, to be conscious, to be in a body, to understand how to give our fictional creations that verisimilitude that we want them to have. So that's inner life. Let me just tick off the bullet points again for you, right? I'm talking about emotions, thoughts, stream of consciousness, memories, and physical sensations. Now, inner life is one category, and are we inner, are we out? What is the outer life? What do I mean by external circumstances, the external world of the book and the character? The easiest way to think of it is that the outer life, the external realities of the book, have to do with what would be visible to an observer. So, dialogue, for example. And I shouldn't say visible, obviously, because some of these are not necessarily things that you would see with the eye. Perceptible is a better word. What would be able to be perceived by an observer? So dialogue would be perceived, right? If you have characters in a scene in your book and they're chatting with each other, somebody's talking, or someone's giving a speech and other characters are listening silently, or there's witty banter going back and forth, doesn't matter. Dialogue is something that can be perceived by everyone in the room. If a character whispers to the character sitting next to them, it's something that's happening out in the real world. It still can be perceived by that character, even if you make a choice that they're the only one that can hear it. It's happening outside. So dialogue is a big one. Physical behavior is, again, kind of obvious. If things are moving, if people are moving, if the environment is shifting, if somebody raises a hand, puts down a glass, pets a cat, pulls back, the bow in order to shoot an arrow, anything that your characters are doing out in the world, if they're walking, if they're running, if they're sleeping, it's physical behavior. It's perceptible to an observer, and therefore it's part of the external world of your storytelling. That's pretty basic, right? Here's some that are maybe less basic. The setting is certainly part of the external world of your storytelling. And setting is anything to do with where the scene, the current action of the book is taking place. So it's not just where we are in a labeled sense. If I said, oh, they're in a coffee shop, the setting is a coffee shop, but that's actually not the physical setting. The physical setting has to do with every aspect of how our characters' bodies are interacting. So the setting may provide physical sensation, right? If it's cold, and if the main character is wearing shorts and their legs are sticking to the chair, the setting can provide a lot of stuff that can end up as part of the inner life. But it's still the setting. It's outside. It's something that all of the characters in the scene share and can perceive. They may perceive it differently. One character may say, it's so cold in here. And the character next to them might say, it's not cold. You're always cold. Put on a sweater. I'm tired of hearing you complain about how cold you are all the time, right? That's just like a normal life conversation. We don't perceive things the same way. But temperature is in the outside world. If something in the environment changes, that's part of the outer life as well. If the ice cubes in a drink melt, if a volcano erupts, if things that happen. So it's a kind of action that can happen in the environment that is perceptible to everyone. So I think outer life, in a sense, is easier to understand. It's just anything that's happening on the outside. If you were watching a play or a movie, you could perceive it. It would be there. It wouldn't require you to perform the impossible task of the Vulcan mind melds that we all love. Remember Mr. Spock from the original Star Trek? What a great character. Could perform the Vulcan mind meld. He could do what novelists do, which is to go into the inner life, the consciousness of another. We can't do that unless we're writing inner life. So Now that I've laid out this idea of the inner life and the external world of the story, you will recognize from your own experience writing that you've got to toggle back and forth between these things. You've got to describe what's going on in the scene. What are people saying? What are people doing? What's happening in the environment? What is the setting in a specific way? What is it? You've got to describe all of that. But then you also probably want to keep checking in with your viewpoint character's experience of it all. How do they feel about it? What are they thinking? What are they anticipating is going to happen? What strategy are they bringing into this moment in the story that they're going to deploy, that they've prepared? What ideas or associations might come to them unbidden when they enter this setting? What stream of consciousness might be going on? What memories might be triggered by it? What physical sensations might come up, right? What are they experiencing within themselves that no one else would know unless they chose to reveal it? You have this unenviable job, although it is kind of enviable because it's really an incredible superpower of fiction, of being able to choose how often to toggle back and forth between those two categories of information. Here's where this is trickier than it looks. So much of the complexity of knowing when and how to toggle back and forth between inner life and the external world of your story has to do with our old friend point of view. Now, if you think of point of view as being like, oh, first person or third person, I'll use an I pronoun to tell the book, or I'll use, he, she pronouns to tell the book, you have missed the main magic of point of view, which is point of view is a complicated topic. I've done some other live streams about it, and I will do more, I promise. But in terms of today's discussion, what I want you to remember is that one of the key defining aspects of your point of view, whichever one you choose, is how much your narrating point of view knows about what's going on in the story. Can the narrator that you've chosen report accurately on the inner life of one character or more than one character? Now, if you've chosen to write in the first person, meaning the narrator is speaking the story from a personal point of view. I, Mary Rose, am narrating this book about my experience doing this live stream on Wednesdays. That's a first person narration. So I can report with some accuracy on my own inner life, one presumes, but I can't report with any accuracy at all on the inner life of anyone else in this story. My cat's over there. There's another character in the room with me, but I can't tell you what her inner life is. I can only observe her external experience. So that's a limitation of first person point of view. If you have decided to write in the third person point of view, you still have to ask yourself, is my narrator, the narrating consciousness I've invented, capable of reporting on the inner life of one character or more than one character? If it's one character, we call that a close or limited third person point of view. And if it's more than one character, we call that an omniscient point of view. But third person point of view is a complicated technique, and it's a wonderful one. It's an incredibly flexible and wonderful way to write. And one of the common misconceptions about it is that this distinction between close third person or limited third person and omniscient third person is like an either or question. It's not. Even in a story where almost all of the time the third person point of view is going to stay faithful to the experiences of a single character, there may well be certain moments when the writer needs to and chooses to pull back and provide a more omniscient overview of what's going on. And then guess what? They can switch. They can zoom in and re-engage with that limited third person approach. So third person is very rarely just strictly one thing. It's often got this quality of what I call changing lanes. You may choose to drive in the middle lane almost the whole journey, but there may be times that you're going to say, no, I'm going to change lanes just for a little bit. because I need to. It would be smart to do so. And then I'll get back in the middle lane. You have a lot of power about this. So the other thing having to do with point of view, it's not just about inner life, although that is very key, obviously. But can your narrating consciousness, this really only applies to third person, see and report on external events in the world that is sort of far away? That if you've got a limit, if you're in the lane of close third person, can you switch lanes and report on something that's happening in the external world of the tale outside the immediate perception of the viewpoint character that you're sticking with most of the time? So it's just another way of showing how point of view affects not only what you can do with inner life reporting, but with the reporting on the external world. So one of the reasons that we get confused about toggling back and forth between inner life and what's going on externally is that we are confused in our handling of point of view. It's a big reason, honestly. And so I just wanted to lay that out there, because if you haven't set the rules of your point of view, or you're just kind of improvising point of view by ear without really thinking about how it works, one of the red flags of that may be that you try to solve your anxiety about the point of view not working by keep having the recurring impulse to toggle back and forth from inside to outside, from outside to inside, inside to outside, right? Until my mother is yelling at you, are you in or are you out? You're having a little bit of a panic attack about the point of view, and this is what you're doing in response. Now, I'm going to talk about what to do instead of that, but I wanted to just make that point so that you know why it feels confusing sometimes. Now, here's some other stuff I want to share before getting into those tips. I would say that the most common malpractice with this inside-outside toggling question that I have observed as a teacher and as someone who mentors writers and has done so for a long time is an excessive amount of time in the inner life of a character. That's what I see most often. It is also something that I see that a writer will almost never go in the inner life of a character, and that's also a flaw that needs to be fixed. And I am going to speak about that, but because most of the time, more than half the time, let me say, the error is too much time spent inside the head of their viewpoint character, I want to just go over that and see why writers do it, and see why it can be problematic for the reader. If we have a kind of a fuzziness about the engagement of our reader with our main character, if we're not feeling very confident about it, we are going to have the impulse to keep going into the head of the main character. We are telling ourselves, and we might not be right about this, but this is what we're telling ourselves, that the way to keep the reader closely engaged, deeply involved with the fate of our main character is to keep trying for this closeness, keep revealing the main character to them. And so we just keep going in the head. We just keep going in the head. We also may have just a general confusion about point of view, and so we keep reverting to the perceptions of our viewpoint character in this very blunt way. We just keep going in their head, and that's in a sense a bit of a panicky grab at having a clear point of view. It's not necessary to do that, of course, because if whatever point of view we choose, if we're using it confidently, the reader knows who the viewpoint character is. They know. We don't have to keep going into the head of the viewpoint character and sort of letting them have a private moment and then toggling back to what's going on in the scene. The reader is smart enough to be able to sustain their knowledge of who the viewpoint character is as long as we're being consistent about it. So we have to have a little confidence in our use of point of view. This question of not trusting the reader's engagement is a sense a more interesting and complicated question, because what is it that keeps the reader engaged? Is it continually revealing our characters' emotions and words and saying, "Oh, I was really upset to hear that," and "Oh, I felt," or physical sensations, "Oh, I felt my cheeks grow warm." How many times have you guys read that or written those words? "Oh, the character blushed, her heart raced, her stomach churned, the skin on her back, the back of her neck prickled." Like, we love to kind of grab our readers and try to get them engaged, deeply engaged with our main character's predicament by making them have this experience of all these inner life type sensations. But I think you might know, if you've been watching these live streams for any length of time, that churning stomachs, beating hearts, and red cheeks are not what engage the reader with our character. What engages the reader with our character is if our character has a high stakes mission, if there's something that they need to accomplish, whose outcome matters. If the outcome matters a lot, and we know what the hero is trying to accomplish, we're going to be rooting for that hero. And this is true whether or not our hero is quote unquote likable or not. If our hero is engaging, if they're fascinating, if they're compelling, if we're rooting for them precisely because they're not likable and we want them to do better. For example, Ebenezer Scrooge, a character whose journey of transformation I've talked about in a few live streams already. We are so engaged because we know what we want to see happen. We want to see Ebenezer Scrooge learn to be a better man. We want to see Dorothy Gale make it home to Kansas. It's what she wants so badly. So reader engagement does not arise from a sort of constant oversharing of banalities of the character's inner life. It arises from engagement with a very clear story that has high stakes, a character who's on some journey of transformation that the reader is rooting for. I hope that makes sense. I hope it makes sense. I'm waving hi to Oren, who showed up. Great to see you here, Oren. I'm so glad to see you at the live stream. I do. I hope you come back as well. Really nice. Happy surprise to see you here. So I hope this is starting to make a little bit of sense. This impulse to spend too much time in the inner life of our character is, in a sense, a substitute for really pursuing what engages the reader, which is a well-told story, right? And the other thing that it could be a red flag of, and I hate to say this because I really don't want to ruin anyone's day, but if you're spending a ton of time inside the head of your main character and you have to drag yourself kicking and screaming outside in the world of the story to just show what's happening in the scene, you may have an inclination toward writing a passive protagonist, a character who's hiding out in their head, a character who has perhaps turned into more of an observer of the story than the central driving figure. This is also a very common pitfall, and many writers have to be gently coaxed, trained, nudged, lovingly coerced away from the habit of conceiving of very passive main characters who just sit and watch everything happen. And I've talked about this at more length elsewhere, but right now, let me just remind you that your job is to tell the story. You're the writer, you're the boss of the book, and it's your job to look at this great chessboard of forces, of characters and opposition with a clear goal, high stakes. Like, it's your job to be the puppeteer, to manipulate all of that stuff, to move your hero through all of that strategically. You're the observer. You're the one who's creating the narrating consciousness. You're the one who's designing and controlling every element of your reader's experience. That's your job. It's not the job of the hero of your book. They are down in the trenches, and what they are doing is actively pursuing whatever it is you've given for them to pursue. They are on a journey of transformation. That's their job. You're up here controlling the strings. They're down there living it. They're in no position to report on the story. They're in no position to be the observing consciousness that's reporting on it. Why? Because they're in the middle of it. They're living it. They're living it. It's your job to create the reader's experience. The main character of your book is a creation of yours. So we get this very murky sometimes, especially early in our writing lives. We don't cut the umbilical cord sufficiently between us and our main characters. We're a little over-identified with them. And so they start acting like an observing consciousness. They start acting like it's their job to look at everything and tell about it. If we make it their job to look at everything and tell about it, we're turning them into the author of the book. And then guess what? We don't have a hero anymore. We know we've lost our protagonist. They're already in the corner writing the book about what happens to them, right? As opposed to living it. And we want them to live it. We'll write the book about what happens to them. I hope that makes sense. So that's the other thing that we can glean from this. Why it's so common for writers to just really, really dwell inside the main character's experience way too much. One other reason that this happens, I should say, is that it's a lot of work to imagine physical environments. It's a lot of work to choreograph physical behavior. You have to really imagine it. And when I say the word choreograph, I really do mean that. You have to figure out what happens in a real world and then describe it in a way that's logical with words. And so writers are lazy sometimes. And instead of having to really think about, like, okay, there's the door, there's the window, this character's here, they can hear this one, but not this one. Like, really imagine the realities of the external world. It's fictional, but it's external. We're building it, right? It has the laws of physics are applying. There's things that can be seen, things that can't be seen. There's doors that must be opened before they can be walked through. There's all kinds of logic. There's a certain amount of planning and imagining, a kind of a three-dimensional imagining that has to go on. It's just a lot of work, and it's a lot easier to just hang out in our hero's consciousness and just, pile on witty observations or sardonic commentary, or, it's just easier. It's a lot easier. So don't be lazy. Your story needs to have a balance of things that happen in the reader's head and things that happen in the outside world. Now, before I get to really knowing how to set that balance, let me also speak just for a little bit for the benefit of those of you who might be listening and say, that's not me. I'm not the one who hides out in my main character's consciousness. I don't hang out in their thoughts and feelings and emotions and physical sensations. In fact, I can barely get myself to write inner life. Everything I write is just all action scenes and description of the world. And I really struggle to get inside my character. This is another complaint that writers have. And I would say that for those writers, the problem is, in a sense, simpler, because it's just a temperamental difference. For some people, it's a lot more work to imagine all the stuff of a physical environment and all the behavior and the choreography, the doors slamming, the people bumping into each other. It's like staging a farce, it's like being the director of a play. You've got to figure out where everybody is all the time and what can be heard and what can't be heard. But for some folks, that's just a lot of work. But for other people, the task of deeply imagining the inner life of someone else is a lot of work. It's just a lot of work. And so they default to what's easier to them. They may love imagining physical environments. They may be the kind of writer who revels in like fantasy worlds, loves to draw maps. invents languages, like building the minutia of the world is their jam. They may really dig that, and that's a great skill to have, right? Because certain kinds of stories, particularly in invented realms, just soar on complicated world building, and some writers love that. So more power to them. I wish we could all take a little spoonful of their magic and add it to what we've got. But if that's the case, they may go a little bit blank when it comes to saying, yeah, but what's your character really feeling? What's going on in your character's body right now? And so they may need a little loving encouragement, a little coaxing to put down the fun of inventing worlds and get their Meryl Streep on to start to really approach writing from the perspective of a method actor and to imagine themselves fully and deeply into the experience of a human being that they've invented who may be, get this, very different from them. Your protagonist may be a very different sort of person than you. You may have thought of a story like an Ebenezer Scrooge type character. You may have invented a character that you feel is very different from you, and you're interested with a kind of a puppeteer's mindset of putting them on this journey, and you can imagine all these things that happen. You're sort of plot driven, right? But to really get in this profound leap of empathy into what it feels like to be them and why they might be the way they are, this is a lot of work. It's what we in the theater, it's what we call working from the outside in as opposed to the inside out. And there's no judgment on this. It's just that some people work better with different strategies. So if you're an outside in person, then you have to just know your tendency about it and do this extra work of remembering that depicting your main character's inner life, their thoughts, their emotions, their physical sensations is part of the storytelling. Perhaps most of your storytelling will want to be external. Maybe you like to write stories that live in the external world, and you're going to reveal your character's emotions and thoughts by what they say and do more than by what's actually going on in their private heads. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it must be revealed because why? Story is the depiction of a transformation of consciousness. And if we never get a glimpse of the consciousness, we never get a glimpse of the transformation. It doesn't feel like a story then. It just feels like a lot of action scenes that don't add up to much. So know your tendency, and whatever it is, try to push yourself in the other direction. Another mistake that comes along with the territory is maybe you have a decent balance, but you just keep switching. Oh, this is a pet peeve of mine, my friends. If you just keep switching, you're in a scene, something important is happening, a long-awaited conversation is happening, or maybe there's some, piece of a confrontation or some piece of physical action that's filled with daring and danger, and we're in it. You've created a vivid fictional dream for the reader, and we're in it, and we're watching it, right? And we're perceiving it with all our senses because you're describing it, and it's happening in the outside world of the story. But after every line, you feel compelled to say something about what the character's thinking about it. And then they go and they take another step. They tap another crampon in the side of the mountain with their pickaxe, and it's all very suspenseful. And then you go back into their heads and they're having a random memory of something that doesn't seem quite related. And then you just keep toggling back and forth. And I just want to tell you that a piece of advice that I give writers all the time is let the scene play out. You're interrupting the reader. It's as if you've created this vivid cinematic experience of what's going on in the external world of your story. So it's like you're at a movie and you're sitting next to the person trying to watch the movie, and you keep whispering in their ear. Like you keep saying, oh, isn't that great? Oh, I love this actor. Oh, you know what I loved her in? That person. I hope you're not that person, but we all know that person. They can't stop chattering about what's happening long enough to let us enjoy what's happening. And you don't want to do that to your reader, right? If you've taken the time to create something really cool happening in the external world of your story, let the scene play out. Don't keep interrupting your reader by dragging them into the chatter of the character who I hope is supposed to be deeply engaged with what's happening. So there's something that's not so truthful about that, right? The character's in the midst of it, but you can't let well enough alone. You keep dragging that character out to also provide the color commentary. Can you imagine if you were watching a baseball game? It's spring now, so you can expect the baseball imagery to start coming out of my mouth. If we expected the pitcher and the catcher and the first baseman like to provide the color commentary while they were playing, right? That's ridiculous. We need them to focus on the game. And then there's some people up in the booth who are saying, well, Don, what do you think about that? Oh, his arm's in great shape today. Don't make your protagonist be the color commentary for the game that's being played. Let them focus on the game. Let them be the star player. Let them be the one on whom everything depends. Their actions are going to decide the outcome. So let them be in the game. Let the commentary be quiet for a little while, and then when the moment is right, when there's an appropriate moment, then if there's stuff that's important to share with the reader, you can share it. But if you change lanes, if you toggle back and forth between inside and outside, like every third sentence, it's really annoying. So that's another one. So let me go through my little tips. I think I've probably touched upon some of them along the way, but I do want to round them up. So if you feel that you're struggling with knowing if you've got the right balance of inner life and external depiction in your writing, the first thing I want you to do is be super clear about which point of view you've chosen. What rules are you playing by? Where can your narrating consciousness go? Where can't they go? If you are using third person and you are having a struggle feeling that it's close enough, and so you try to fix that by keep bumping back into the inner life of your main character, think about it. Really get clearer about how to work with third person. Do a little homework about point of view. Here's a general rule of thumb when you're toggling back and forth between inner and outer. Don't tell us what you're about to show us. So in the inner life of your main character, you might feel compelled to include lines like, I was furious and I decided to tell him what I thought of him. And then the next line is, Bertha, I am so upset with you and I have been for 20 years. You don't need to tell us that the character is upset and is about to give Bertha a piece of her mind if you are about to show us it happening, right? That's redundant. So a lot of times that sense of an excess of inner life has to do with the fact that we keep telling what we're about to show. That's almost like we built ourselves a little scaffold while we were drafting, and then we forgot to take it out in revision. Those lines doesn't mean you're a bad person or a bad writer. It's just the kind of excess writing that's normal in a draft. It's like a placeholder. But then when you actually let the scene play out, it's no longer necessary to pre-explain what's about to happen. So don't tell us what you're about to show us. Let your scenes, your juicy scenes, your carefully crafted scenes play out without interruption. Don't let your main character be that person in the movie theater who keeps yapping in the ear of the person who's just trying to enjoy the movie. Don't continually change lanes. Don't toggle back and forth too often. Think about those ball players on the field, right? It's just annoying. Let them focus on the game. And then at the end of the inning, we can talk about what happened, right? Be honest with yourself about whether your hero is active or passive. If your hero is active, they're too busy driving the story forward to be offering all of the commentary about it. And here's another tip as well. Your journey of transformation, the character arc, the arc of character development, as people often call it, it should not just be claimed by the hero in their inner life. It should be made evident to the world of the story by what your character says and does. Just remember, just as in real life, people say all kinds of things, but we judge people by their behavior. We judge people, we know who they truly are based on what they do, especially under pressure. And in a story, it is no different. Your story is designed to put your hero under pressure again and again and again. And it's what your hero does under pressure that reveals the character transformation. If your hero is just always thinking about their problems, they may claim at the end of the book, well, I'm quite a different person now. Ebenezer Scrooge could just mull it all over, just sit there mulling it over, saying, wow, I really learned a lot from those ghosts. I think I'm going to do better. I'm going to really try. I'm going to be a good guy now. Really have got a lot to think about. Fade out. That is not a satisfying ending, right? We need to see him act like a changed man. We need to see what he does with his rebirth as a new fellow. So your characters as well need to manifest their arc of transformation in the outside world, not just in their heads. If they're ruminating all the time, claiming to have changed, but offering no evidence of same, you've got some work to do. So in conclusion, I'm going to just look over in the comments for a minute to see if anyone's got questions about this. But in conclusion, I just want to repeat that most writers will tend to be more one than the other. They'll often get stuck hiding out and ruminating a lot in the head of a character who may be too passive, or they get so besotted with building these elaborate external constructions that they forget that the whole point of all of it is simply to provide an arena in which that central character can go on a journey of transformation. And a transformation is not an external, let me stop and say it again. Transformation is manifested and proven with external evidence, as I just explained about Ebenezer Scrooge, but it's an inner change that is being manifested. It is a transformation of consciousness, in the words of Joseph Campbell. It is essentially an internal transformation. And the last observation I want to make about that profound observation from Joseph Campbell is that writers often get stuck with a kind of a false dichotomy about whether their story is character driven or plot driven. And I recently did a whole live stream about that very question. But all stories are a transformation of consciousness. It's an internal change. So even the most plot driven tale is essentially just offering evidence of a character's inner transformation. It's provoked by external events and it's proven with external manifestations, but we cannot leave out the inner life of the character. It's got to be there in sufficient amount to allow that journey of transformation of consciousness to be experienced by the reader. That's why the reader comes to us, to go on a ride of storytelling. And so we have to let them in. We kind of have to let them on the ride in order for them to go. And that's why inner life is so important. That's what I have for you today, my friends. I'm so delighted to talk about this with you all. I hope it was of benefit. Another reminder, if you will, if you're not already on the Path of the Storyteller mailing list, this is just a really particularly good time to make sure that you're on it. And you'll be hearing from, as soon as you get on the mailing list, you'll get some invitations to have a conversation with me and get to know each other better. But in the very near future, within the next week or so, there's going to be a really special offer going out to you guys. So I don't want you to miss it. Thank you all. Make sure that you leave a comment below and let me know what topics you want me to talk about in the future. I absolutely love your suggestions. We get some of our best topics from you. Appreciation from Nancy. I'm sending it right back at you, Nancy. Nancy says, I learned so much. Thank you. Very good. It is always the case that I learn from my students and mentees what needs to be spoken about, and this is definitely something that comes up again and again. So I had a feeling it would be a benefit. All right, then I will see you all next week, and until then, I wish you happy writing.